last 2 weeks saw no major engagements. The Federals and Confederates both jockeyed for position and prepared for war. A new potential player, the British, entered the scene. The Queen recognized both sides as belligerents and proclaimed the Empire neutral in the conflict. I am Brendan Forrest, and this is Civil War. On Sunday, May 26th, Major General George B. McClellan from Cincinnati ordered 3 federal columns into Western Virginia to protect the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad and aid pro-Unionists in the area. Postmaster General Montgomery Blair declared postal ties with the southern states ending on May 31st. On the 27th, General Benjamin Butler sent troops from Fort Monroe 8 miles by boat to seize Newport News, Virginia. The operation succeeded, with no shots fired or any opposition faced on the 29th. Also on the 27th, Chief Justice Taney ruled the military arrest of John Merryman had violated the Writ of Habeus Corpus. In other words, Merryman was illegally detained by the orders of the president, and that the president did not have the authority to suspend his privilege. Taney ordered General George Cadwalader, commanding the fort where Merryman was being held, to produce Merryman for a hearing in court. Cadwalader stated he was acting under the president's orders, who had delegated the authority to suspend habeas corpus to the military. Justice Taney declared Cadwalader in contempt of court and sent a U.S. Marshal to serve the order. The Marshal was never admitted to the fort, and Taney's order never included the release of Merryman. Lincoln's actions were deemed unconstitutional. He would rationalize his actions and claim he had the power of suspension in certain cases, and he continued to execute it. Exact numbers are not available, but estimates ranged between 13,000 and 38,000 Americans were illegally detained by Lincoln's suspension of the writs. He claimed the Constitution provided for the suspension in cases of rebellion or invasion where public safety required it, whereas Chief Justice Taney stated only Congress had the authority to suspend habeas corpus. Authorities accused John Merryman of recruiting for the Confederacy. On the 28th, Brigadier General Irvin McDowell assumed command of the Department of Northeastern Virginia. The USS Union established its blockade of Savannah, Georgia. The British House of Commons debated relations with both the United States and the Confederate States. The Battle of Aquia Creek begins on the 29th and lasts for 3 days. Union gunboats, led by Commander James H. Ward, bombard Confederate coastal batteries positioned at the mouth of the Aquia Creek during the established blockade of Chesapeake Bay. This bombardment resulted in 10 casualties. Also on the 29th, in Washington, Miss Dorothea Dix received authorization to establish military hospitals. She became the Superintendent of Nurses for the Union a week later and will serve there through the war. During the war, she will be instrumental in establishing or expanding 30 hospitals. She expected a lot from her nurses and set many standards for them. Nurse ages were to be between the ages of 35 and 50, and she insisted they be plain looking, not wearing accessories like jewelry, hoop skirts, bows, or even curls. This was to not tempt the male doctors and patients. Miss Dix's high standards earned her names like the Dragon Dix and the Dictator in Petticoats. Despite all that, she fought ardently for her nurses. At the beginning of the war, male nurses received $20.50 a month, while female nurses performed their duties in a volunteer status, even having to cover their own expenses. Through her advocacy, by the end of the war, Dix had convinced the government to supply her nurses with food, transportation, housing, and a wage of 40 cents a day for their work. Southern salvagers towed the USS Merrimack wreckage to the southern-held Norfolk Naval Shipyard's only dry dock. A survey of the wreck found her lower hull and machinery undamaged. Work will begin to outfit her as an ironclad. Also on the 30th, Union Secretary of War Simon Cameron notified Ben Butler in Fort Monroe that he should retain any slaves entering his lines, and he should refrain from surrendering to alleged masters any persons who may come within your lines. You will employ such persons in the services to which they may be best adapted, keeping an account of the labor by them performed, of the value of it, and of the expenses of their maintenance. The question of their final disposition will be reserved for further determination. Butler will identify the slaves as contraband, and the issue of what to do with runaway and freed slaves within Union lines is born. Not until the enactment of the Emancipation Proclamation will this question be answered. On the 31st, General Pierre Gustave Toutant Beauregard, known as a Creole because of his Louisiana heritage, and the Confederate commander who fired on Fort Sumter, is named commander of the forces along the Alexandria line, which include all northern Virginia. This collection of units, referred to as the Army of Northern Virginia, will see much glory in the future. Beauregard will take command of the force on the 2nd of June. This placement will put him in command during the first major engagement of the war, 2 months from now. On June 1st, batteries test fire for the first time along the strategic defense point of Cairo, Illinois. This town became the naval headquarters of the Union's Mississippi River Squadron, as well as a vital supply center, as it was strategically placed at the confluence of the Ohio and the Mississippi rivers. In the Philadelphia Naval Yard, Captain DuPont raised concerns about Great Britain's reaction to the Union's proclaimed blockade, writing, "I do not like the tone of things in England. Lord Derby and Granville talk of 2,000 miles of coast to be blockaded. They seem to forget, so far as their rights and international interests are concerned, we have only to blockade the ports of entry from Chesapeake to Galveston. This consternation on DuPont's part was a question of the international legality of blockade. The Union's policy was contradictory. They were attempting to claim the Confederate States of America was not a legal nation and did not qualify for recognition and the associated benefits by other nations. International law only allowed the establishment of a legal blockade upon another nation. Lands in a state of rebellion were not eligible for a legal blockade. Another international question raised by DuPont: did nations have to establish a blockade along an entire coastline? This was an impossibility for the Union, as the Confederacy held 3,500 miles of coastline. Would it be illegal to only blockade the ports? This was another near impossible task for the Union. At the beginning of the war, the North had 42 ships in active service. This question will remain an issue through the majority of the war. On Monday, the 3rd, Stephen A. Douglas, known as the Little Giant and famous for debating Abraham Lincoln for the Illinois Senate seat in 1858 and for splitting the Democratic Party in 1860, dies in Springfield, Illinois. The Battle of Philippi happened on June 3rd. 2 Union columns, commanded by Brigadier General T.A. Morris, converged in Philippi in what is now West Virginia. Colonel Ebenezer Dumont's column marched on the west side of the river to fix a Confederate garrison in town. Colonel Benjamin Kelly's column was to encircle the Confederates and come up from the Barber County Highway from the south. After marching all night through heavy rain, Kelly instead took a more northern route, entering Philippi from the east. The attack caught Colonel G.A. Porterfield completely by surprise. The rebels fled south with the Federals in hot pursuit, giving this battle the nickname the Philippi Races, and condemned as disgraceful in the South. This minor action, costing 26 Confederate casualties, did much to enhance the reputation of Major General George B. McClellan. He had little to do with the actual battle, but he took full advantage of the political outcome. Also on the 3rd, in quick turnabout of captures, the brig Joseph was captured by the Confederate privateer Savannah, which was then captured, in turn, by the USS Perry in Kentucky on the 4th. Naval Lieutenant William Nelson received 5,000 weapons from Lincoln to distribute to the Loyalists of Kentucky and eastern Tennessee. These weapons, dubbed Lincoln guns by pro-Confederate forces, the Loyalists will be quick to adopt the catchy name and use these weapons with pride. The pro-Southern governor of Kentucky, Beriah Magoffin, ran his own scheme to provide weapons to secessionists. He paid $60,000 for a weapon cache, only to find them unserviceable. A wily Yankee trader had pulled a dupe on the old governor. On the 5th, Confederate shore batteries on Pig Point, near Hampton Roads, trade shots with the United States revenue cutter Harriet Lane, a ship named after the niece of President James Buchanan. John Fouts, captain of Harriet Lane, and 5 of his soldiers would take injuries in this engagement. Here are some other events taking place in the waters today. The USS Niagara, blockading Mobile, Alabama, captured the schooner Aid, and Union flag officer Garrett Pendergrast reported the USS Quaker City had captured the bark General Greene at the Capes of the Chesapeake. On the 6th, Henry A. Wise, the former governor of Virginia, who had ordered the execution of John Brown, was directed to command the rebel forces in Western Virginia. He had no military training and had been commissioned as an officer only the day before. He will prove to be an absolute failure in this role. And on the 7th, the little giant Stephen A. Douglas is laid to rest in Chicago. In remembrance, Abraham Lincoln ordered the White House draped in black, with no visitors being received that day. Also on this day, in the Washington Arsenal, a worker, attempting to remove a defective fuse from a case shot, caused an accidental spark, igniting the shell. The explosion killed him and wounding several others. This accident could have been much worse. The building contained more than 36,000 artillery rounds and almost 7 million small arms cartridges. Fortunately, the plant manager kept his head, extinguishing the fire before it could spread. One final event this week. General P.G.T. Beauregard, consolidating his forces in Manassas, issued the following proclamation to the people of Northern Virginia. A reckless and unprincipled tyrant has invaded your soil. Abraham Lincoln, regardless of all moral, legal, and constitutional restraints, has thrown his abolition hosts among you, who are murdering and imprisoning your citizens, confiscating and destroying your property, and committing other acts of violence and outrage too shocking and revolting to humanity to be enumerated. At this point in the war, this claim is a great exaggeration. The war is only weeks old, with many still believing one major battle would determine the outcome. The first major engagement is fast approaching, and will show citizens that the war would be both long and costly. Soon, we will begin to witness acts of violence that are shocking and revolting to humanity, as Beauregard claimed. But that is for another week. This is Civil War. We thank you for watching today. Check out our other videos. Like and comment down below, and make sure you subscribe. We'll see you next time.